Alright, everybody. Welcome back to Potted Plant Entertainment. My name is Krill, and I review movies and I rank them on a scale of 0 to 100 in increments of 5. Today, we are wrapping up our Indiana Jones series with Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. I have a very special history with this movie. I remember when it came out when I was a kid. I was in the 2nd grade. And yeah, gosh, I can't believe it's been that long. And I begged my mom to take me to see it, but she wouldn't because it was PG-13. So everyone at school was talking about it except for me. I was left out. And that was sad. And then I finally saw it on DVD. This DVD. My copy of Raiders, Last Crusade, and Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, I've had the same copies since I was a kid. But Temple of Doom I had on VHS. It wasn't until a few years ago when I finally got Temple of Doom on DVD. Oh, Chris, not Blu-ray? Yeah, no, not Blu-ray, DVD. Anyways, and this was my favorite movie in the franchise. I love this movie. It was my all-time favorite movie. I used to tell people it was my favorite movie, and people were like, why? The movie sucks. And at the time, I didn't get it, and I didn't care because it was my favorite movie. And then my parents wouldn't let me watch it anymore because it was PG-13, which made me very, very sad because of how much I loved it. It was like my favorite thing in the world, and it was just taken, and I was very sad. But now I'm an adult, and I can watch this movie through an adult's eyes. And it is much more apparent to me now why people always hate on this movie. At the time when I was a child, I didn't get it. But watching it through an adult's eyes, I get it. Especially because I've listened to other people's opinions. I watched a lot of other people's reviews for this movie in preparation for this video because I really wanted to get to the bottom of why people hate this movie. Because I have never hated this movie. Now, it is my least favorite movie in the franchise. I think Dial of Destiny is quite a bit better than this. And I've reviewed the other 4 already, including Dial of Destiny, so go check those out if you want. But I watched a lot of reviews on YouTube to get other people's opinion, like Red Letter Media. I watched their review for that movie years ago. I recently rewatched it. The Mr. Plinkett video, it's pretty funny. And I get it much better now than I used to. Even rewatching it recently for this video, I was like, this movie's not that bad. Like, I don't really get it. Like, I can notice the issues with it more now, but just gathering people's opinions on the movie helped me to understand where all that hate comes from. I still don't hate this movie, but I have a lot of issues with it now. And I'm glad that I matured enough as a film critic to be able to really talk objectively about this film. But I will never hate this movie. I will always have some kind of love for this film because of how much it meant to me as a kid. Now, I'll say right off the bat, basically the way I view this movie is this. I was going to save this and say it at the end of the video, but just in case people click away, I want to get this out there because I think this is a good way to put it. Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull is to the Indiana Jones franchise what The Phantom Menace and Attack of the Clones is to the Star Wars franchise. It's not bad. It's just very mid. Something that Margot Robbie is not, by the way, because that's a meme going around now. No, she's hot. But it's very mid. It's very middle of the pack. You can watch it and be entertained, but there are parts of it that are gonna probably upset you, and there's a lot of things about it that just aren't really that good. But it's okay. You can watch this movie and be entertained by it, but that's about it. So I have a lot of notes here, and I'm already almost 5 minutes in this video. I have a lot here. Okay, so this is going to be a long video, so buckle in, folks, for the adventures of Indiana Jones. Okay, Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. Came out in 2008, and it stars Harrison Ford, Shia LaBeouf, Karen Allen, Kate Blanchett, Ray Winstone, and John Hurt, and it was directed by the man himself, Steven Spielberg. And this movie tells a story. This movie takes place, what's it gotta be? 18 years? Yeah, 18 years after the events of Last Crusade. I gotta say, the Indiana Jones kind of got a lot older in those 18 years. I don't know if that's a plot hole or not. It's just something I recently noticed. In those 18 years that passed, he got a lot older. Like, even like in the throwback, like the flashback sequence in Dial of Destiny, he's about the same age as he was at the end of Last Crusade. And that movie takes place 6 years later. So why is he so old in this one? I don't know. Whatever. It may be a plot hole, but you know what? It's a lot better than in the X-Men movies when they just never age at all throughout the decade. So whatever. Anyways, so this takes place in 1957. This is the height of the Cold War. And Russians have kidnapped Indiana Jones to force him to get them into Area 51 and get this mysterious box for them. He is then accused of being a communist. And then he meets his son, who ropes him into an adventure to help him rescue his mother. And his childhood father figure, John Hurt, who plays Harold Oxley, who helped raise him. And adventure ensues. This is going to be a spoiler-filled video. This movie has been out for 15 years now, so we're going to talk about spoilers. Yeah. Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. Let's get into it. So, let's get into my pros first before we get into my long list of cons. So, Indy is back, punching evil armies and exploring ancient ruins. I love it. It's great. Like, a lot of people say that this doesn't feel like an Indiana Jones movie. To me, it does. I mean, there's a lot wrong with it, but it still, for me, has like that old vibe where he's punching evil bad guys from the time period that the movie takes place in. He's exploring ancient ruins and looking for a MacGuffin. It's great. It sets the time period well. I love the choice for the 1950s Cold War era. This movie is, so the original three were based on like the 1930s like adventure serials from that time, but the 1950s was a lot about creature flicks. So that's what they were trying to do here with the whole alien thing. Now, for a lot of people that doesn't work. For me, it does. That's just me. I mean, I think Indiana Jones can really push it. A lot of people don't like it when Indiana Jones really pushes it. I think this franchise can and sometimes should. The production design is great. As always, like with all these movies, they set the 1950s really, really well. It feels like the 1950s. It's great. I like the opening. It's cool. Indiana Jones opens with action, or a little bit of action, but this one kind of takes a little bit of time to get into that. It's more mysterious. And I like exploring Area 51. I thought that was pretty neat. A lot of people make fun of the Crystal Skull. I should have gotten it out for this video, but I have a model of me with the Crystal Skull. I'll put a picture of me right here with the Crystal Skull. It's me in a Indiana Jones costume holding my little skull. It's a projector. I got it when I was a kid, and I've always really liked it. I like the Crystal Skull. I think it's pretty cool. I mean, it's literally a big, elongated cranium crystal skull. Like, that thing is cool. I like it. A lot of people don't. I think it's pretty neat. It's very interesting. I remember when I was a kid, I was very interested by this film. I dropped my paper. Stay. So much so that I remember I even did a school project on the legend of the Crystal Skulls and the Mitchell Hedges skull. The real legend is that there are 13 crystal skulls. I mean, there's a bunch of crystal skulls, but 13 of them have like magical powers. And 12 of them we know where there are. There's one where like a private collector says that whenever they go downstairs at night, it's like a disco ball coming off of the skull. So they're pretty interesting, but nobody knows where the 13th one is. I only know this because I watched like Ancient Aliens on the History Channel one time, and they were talking about how like there's a theory that the 13th one is in some distant universe, and it's floating there in like the middle of the universe with these pillars around it, and each of the pillars has like this different color crystal floating above it. Something like that. I don't know. It's weird. But anyway, so there are 12 that we know of They're said to have magical powers. So anyway, that's what this is based on. That's the real life legend, and they don't look anything like they do in the one in the movie. But still, it is pretty interesting, especially if you're into the whole alien thing. I mean, I'm not Dan Aykroyd, but it's pretty interesting. The action sequences are really, really good. I love the sword fight between Mutt and Spalko in the jungle. It's great. I love the fist fight between Indiana Jones and I believe the character's name is Colonel Dovchenko, is how you pronounce it. The ant fight is great. That's always been my favorite part of this movie. I love Harrison Ford and Shia LaBeouf have really good chemistry together, and I love their characters together. I love it when Mutt picks up the beer bottle in the diner scene. He just takes it off the waitress's tray and then Indy puts it back. Or when the Russians crash into the statue of Marcus Brody, because now he has passed away, and so has Indy's father, and the head falls through the windshield, and he's laughing, and Indy just gives him a dirty look. It's a callback to when Indy laughed when the Nazi got hurt in Last Crusade, and Sean Connery just sort of stared at him. It's a callback to that. It shows how Indy has changed over the years, and I like that very much. I like their camaraderie together. They're good together. They have good chemistry. I like those characters. I do like Mutt. A lot of people don't like Mutt. I do like Mutt. I just wish, the monkey thing didn't happen. But anyway, we'll get into that. I think it handles exposition well. There's too much of it. I'll get into that, but like I said, I find this movie to be very interesting. So when they are talking about the plot, I'm interested in it. I just wish there was more characterization. The sets are great. Like the Akator temples, for anybody who doesn't know this, they actually built that. That's all practical. The obelisk, the folding arms on the obelisk, that was all real. They actually built that stuff, and it looks great. The cemetery, it's a real set, and it looks great. It's creepy. It's eerie. I love the whatever those guys were, the cemetery ninja psycho guys. Those guys were pretty cool. It's shot on location, like Indiana Jones movies always are and always should be, and I appreciate that. Even the new one is. They actually went to Morocco to film. It's great. The stunts are really good. Harrison Ford does a lot of his own stunts in this, and it's awesome. He actually jumped off the crate and swung on the whip. I mean, obviously they had him on wires, but he jumped off the crate and swung on the whip himself. That was Harrison Ford, not a stunt double. It's very creepy. It's very eerie. The cemetery thing is very eerie. The skull itself is so creepy and eerie. And the music in this movie is fantastic. John Williams' score, he knocked it out of the park. The music is great. The Skulls theme helps make this movie creepy. Like when Indy's staring into the eyes of the skull because the Russians are forcing him to, and you hear the dun, 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 dun. That's really great. I love it. I also love the line, she was like, Marion comes back as we find out that Mutt is Indy's son, and he had him with Marion, and Marion did not tell him because he left her a week before the wedding. And she says, there must have been plenty of women for you over the years. And he says, there were a few, but they all had the same problem. She says, what's that? He says, they weren't you, honey. That's very flirtatious. I have to find a reason to use that on someone someday. It's a great line. I like how Indy has that older man mindset. I like the contrast between him younger and him now. But he's still got that heart for adventure. He's just not as much, he's a little, he mentally he's slower now, but physically he's not. The pacing is really good. Just like the other three movies, this movie has great pacing. It just keeps moving along. It's great. It never feels like it wastes time. I love the natives when they finally get to Akator. The costuming on those guys is great. The whip is real. It's not CGI. They wanted to CGI it, and thank God Harrison Ford told them, no, I'm going to do it for real. Bless you, Harrison Ford. It has all the classic Indy tropes. It's got bugs, snakes, fist fight with a big guy, car chases, etc. It's all there. The makeup and costuming is all great. It's got some classic Indy gags, like when Indy falls off the power sled after he escapes from the Russians, or the Mutt's like, it's just a thing. It's got all that. It's overall pretty entertaining. It never leaves me bored. I never get bored watching this movie. Some people say this movie is boring. I disagree. I think all this is very fairly entertaining. I enjoy it. Okay. So that's my pros. I have a lot more to say, so just stick around because okay. So I have my cons, but then I also have a mixed section that I want to talk about. So let's get into it. Okay. So the cons. Let's just start right off the bat. The fridge scene. Indiana Jones escapes from the Russians and he wanders into Doomtown. There's a map of like this in Call of Duty, for those of you who may remember that. And essentially, and this was a real thing that America was doing at the time, where they would build a town and put like mannequins and stuff there, and then they would test a nuke on it to like see its real effects. This is something that was actually happening at the time. And he wanders into one, not realizing what it is, and then he hears that the nuke is coming. So he climbs into a steel line or whatever lined refrigerator and shuts the door, and then it blasts him far away. It crashes. You hear a click. He rolls out of it. He stands up and he stares at the nuclear explosion, which, by the way, that shot of him looking at the nuclear explosion is beautiful. I love it. It's a great shot. When I was a kid, I didn't understand what was happening here, and I thought it was a black hole. So I just thought he was staring at a black hole. But it's a really great shot. But the fridge thing, it's been subject for debate. Most people seem to be against it. George Lucas wrote that, saying that scientists feel there's a 50-50 chance he could have survived. And I think that's true. The scientists are very torn on that. I saw that Matt Pack, Film Theory, did a video talking about this scene, and he actually studied like the math and the science behind it. And basically, yeah, it does seem like he could have survived by doing this. It's just very unlikely. And even if he did survive, he would have gotten like radiation, you know, like would have given him like cancer or something later on. Like all the people who died later on after the Hiroshima Nagasaki bombings, the people who survived those bombings, they died later on from the radiation. Harrison Ford, Indiana Jones probably wouldn't have lived to be old enough for Dial of Destiny to even happen after experiencing this. So that doesn't really make much sense. But I mean, the way the fridge lands, like he would have been seriously hurt. And in those times, and I was a kid, when I was a kid, I had a teacher who made us read Mr. Popper's Penguins. He had this weird obsession with penguins. I don't know. There was another teacher that I briefly had in middle school who had this obsession with flamingos, but his thing was penguins. So we read Mr. Popper's Penguins, and he taught us that back in those days, back in like the 40s and the 50s, refrigerators didn't have emergency latches on the inside. So if you got into them, you get stuck. Well, I love this movie so much that made me realize Indiana Jones would have been stuck in that fridge. And I've noticed that other people pointing that out now too, which is good. But you hear a click and he just rolls out and he's not hurt. Like the way that fridge lands, like he would have broke his shoulder or something. Like that would have hurt. He wouldn't have been able to get out. He would have been stuck in it, even if he were able to survive the explosion. And there's not really a very high chance of that happening. So it's not a very good scene. And the whole Doomtown sequence doesn't even advance the plot in any way. It seriously, like, you could have cut that whole thing out of the movie, and the whole thing with him being accused of being a communist spy, and it would have changed nothing. So why was it even there? And then I'll just jump straight to the number 2 thing, which is the monkey vine scene. Yeah, it's pretty dumb. Even when I was a kid and this was my favorite movie, I used to wonder, why are the monkeys helping Mutt? I just sort of assumed it was the skull, like, influencing to do it. Kind of like, you could use the skull as like an excuse. Like, how is this possible? Oh, because of the skull. Like what people do with Star Wars. Like, how does that happen? Oh, the Force. It's because of the Force. It's the Force. You can explain away anything in Star Wars by just saying, oh, because of the Force. That's kind of what I was doing with the skull in the scene. Oh, because of the skull. But it doesn't make sense, and it's really dumb. This movie also has a saturation on it that the other ones don't have. And I don't know if I dislike it, but I don't know how much I like it either. Sometimes I look and I think, oh, it looks pretty good. But the problem is that it also makes things look fake. And the lighting in the movie isn't particularly very good, because even when things are real, they look fake. Like the whole jungle chase sequence, that's real, but when you look at it, it looks like they filmed in front of a green screen. It's just, it's the saturation, the lighting makes things that are real look fake. Also, maybe this is just me, but the characters with like really thick Russian accents, their accents can be so thick that sometimes I just have a hard time understanding what they're saying. I don't know if anybody else has had that problem. Maybe it's just me. Um, the quicksand sequence, Spielberg hated that. Spielberg hated a lot of things about this movie, and most of the things that people don't like about this movie were George Lucas's ideas, and Spielberg tried to talk him out of it, and he just wasn't listening. So George Lucas is really the reason why this movie isn't really very good. I love and respect George Lucas, but he dropped the ball on this film. But Spielberg didn't like the quicksand sequence, and the they pull him and Indy and Marion get pulled out by Mutt with the snake, a giant rat snake, and it's like, how would that snake not rip? Like, you would rip that poor snake in half doing that. And you know, it's so funny. All he had to do was take off his jacket and just toss them the jacket and pull them in with that. That would have worked better. Just grab the sleeve and he can grab the other sleeve and pull them out. I mean, that would have worked. That would actually work. A snake would. I mean, I get like why they went with the snake and not the jacket. It's because the snake makes it more entertaining. I get it, but it just doesn't really make sense because there's no way the snake could have survived that. There's also this joke in the movie that my entire life I never understood. And when I was a kid, I thought it was just me being naive. But it turns out nobody else gets the joke either. It's the rip sound joke when they're in the truck when Marion, Mutt, and Indy are in the back of the truck with Colonel Dovchenko, which, by the way, me and a friend of mine in middle school actually reenacted that scene in drama class. I got a C on it. That's right. Anyways, so Mutt like tosses with his feet. He tosses his knife to Indy, and then Indy throws it over his shoulder, and you hear a rip sound. And he looks over at Mutt, and Mutt's like, "Oh shit!" And it's like, what are they talking about? What happened? I don't understand. What was that joke? I don't get that joke. So, another problem I have with this movie is Mac. Mac is not a good character. Played by Ray Winstone. Ray Winstone does a good job playing the character. I don't have any issue with him. It's just the way this character's written. He's not good. He doesn't have any sort of arc. As a matter of fact, I don't think anybody in this movie really has any kind of an arc, but he definitely doesn't. He's greedy, and then like when he dies, it's like, why do I care? Like they expected us to care, and I'm just like, no, screw him. Why would I care? Like, he's constantly betraying Indy. He's working with the Russians, and he's trying to steal gold, which is like, his greed leads to his death. And then he's laying there, like after Indy tosses him the whip, and he's like, Jose, I'm gonna be all right. What are you talking about? You're about to die. No, you're not. What do you mean? I don't know. It just, everything with him just sucks. Indy hasn't physically aged in this movie. Like I said, and mentally he's aged quite a bit, but physically he hasn't. He's like, they keep making old jokes about him, but then he jumps from one car to another and beats the crap out of a bunch of Russians single-handedly. That's fine with me, but if you're gonna do that, then you can't make a bunch of old jokes about him. So it's like, which is it? Is he old, or is he still awesome? Which is it? Make up your mind. The Russians in this movie have stormtrooper aim. There's so many times where the good guys should have gotten shot in this, and they just don't. It's dumb. So the waterfall sequences were, like I said, this movie shot on location. They filmed it at actual waterfalls. So they go down one, then they go down the other. Now, obviously, this isn't like, it's supposed to be 3 times it drops, right? So they go down one, they go down another, then they go down the biggest one. Well, these 3 waterfalls aren't actually lined up in front of each other like that. So they had to go to 3 different waterfalls and then just edit it together and make it look like they're 3 waterfalls, like, lined up. But after the second one, you can clearly see that there's not a third waterfall in front of it. Like there's literally like a rock terrain directly in front of it. Like you couldn't have moved the camera over a little so we don't see that, then I would have bought it. But you can clearly see the terrain right there in front of them. There's no waterfall there. Also, surviving the waterfalls didn't really make a whole lot of sense either. On the third one, they all fall out of the car and then they just get up and crawl away onto the land. It's like, you're fine? What? That's like Fast and Furious type physics. So they get to Akator, right? And it's like, how long did the natives hide in those walls? They're in the walls. And then when our heroes walk out of that room, you see them all break through the walls, like about ready to go after them. And it's like, how did you get in there? Who built up the wall behind you after you went in? How did you break it so easily? And why are you even in there? How long have you been in there? How do you pee in there? How do you eat in there? What do you do in there? Do you just lay there or sit there for like years waiting for somebody else to show up? What do they do in the wall? I mean, the effect is kind of cool, but when you think about it, it doesn't make any sense. Let's see. Part-time. The line part-time in this movie. So when you watch the trailer for this movie, and Mutt says, you're a teacher? And then he goes, part-time. But in the movie, he goes, part-time. And it just doesn't sound as good. Why didn't they use the take from the trailer in the movie? That one sounded better. Okay, so a little known fact about this movie is that Frank Darabont, who directed The Shawshank Redemption and The Green Mile, two of the best movies ever made, he wrote a draft for this movie. Now, I only know what happens at the very end, but it sounds to me, and it seems a general consensus of people who have read the whole thing, that script is a lot better than this one. But George Lucas didn't like it, and he hired people to do rewrites on it, and Frank Darabont apparently was pretty pissed off about that. I am too. If his script is as good as people say, why didn't you use his? Why? Like, George Lucas, bro, what are you doing? It's no wonder he hasn't directed a movie since Revenge of the Sith, because what are you doing here, man? Like, why? This movie could have been great. Seriously, look it up. Look up Frank Darabont's unused script. The ending for it is pretty cool. The ending hero is pretty cool. I don't understand why, George Lucas, why? I love you. Like, you're my childhood hero, dude. But, dude, why? What were you thinking? Okay. I don't think that Indy would have been stupid enough to think that Mac is on his side again. The whole double agent thing, I don't think Indy would have fell for that. I really don't. I think he's smart. He's smart enough to where he wouldn't have bought that. So in the quicksand scene, Indy tells Ox to go get help, right? He says, help! 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 Go! So then he runs off into the jungle. And then he brings back the Russians. Well, why would you tell him? And then when he comes back with the Russians, he's like, great work, Ox, thanks. Like, all sarcastic. And Ox is like, help. And it's like, what were you expecting him to do? You said go get help. You're in the jungle. Who else was he gonna get? What were you expecting him to do? If you told me to go get help, that's what I would have done too. I don't understand. What was he thinking? The Ark of the Covenant cameo. So it has a cameo, right? Remember, Indy drives through the crates, and then we see the broken crate. The camera moves in on it, and there's the Ark of the Covenant inside that crate, right? So they were signifying this is the warehouse that the Ark of the Covenant got put away in at the beginning of Raiders of the Lost Ark. So I don't mind seeing it there. I think that's pretty cool, but it's like the cameo is not handled well. The camera just moves right up to it. I mean, like, you couldn't have been a little bit more subtle about it. I mean, it's just so they put the camera right there. Like, come on, dude. Like, that could have been so cool and you ruined it. Um, Also, maybe you could correct me on this, but I don't think Indy kills more than like two bad guys in this movie. Indiana Jones should kill a lot of people. Like Last Crusade, he killed a lot of people in that movie, dude. Like he killed like 4 Nazis with like one gunshot. He kills a lot of bad guys in that movie. This movie, he doesn't kill very. Save for Dial of Destiny, he doesn't really kill very many bad guys. And that's disappointing because Indiana Jones should kill a lot of bad guys. I like seeing Indiana Jones kill bad guys. Seeing Indiana Jones kill Nazis is a lot of fun because nobody likes Nazis. Unless you are one, of course. But nobody likes Nazis. So, I mean, this is Russians, but this is during the Cold War. So if the Soviets are the bad guys, make them the bad guys. Have them kill bad guys. Let's go. Come on. Indiana Jones. More violence, please. Which leads me to the next point. This movie's just not violent enough. Like, the movie feels like it was even too scared to kill that one monkey when the monkeys in Mutt, like, swing into Spalko's car, and the monkeys are attacking Spalko and helping Mutt for some odd reason. And Spalko throws the monkey off the cliff, and then it catches a branch. It's like they were too scared to kill the monkey, but in Raiders, they literally poisoned one to death. Like, okay. I mean, the ant sequence, I feel like, is the exception. That was kind of violent when the ants are, like, eating the Russians. Okay, that's my exception to it, but, yeah. The movie's also not dirty enough. It's too clean. Like, you look at the characters' costumes from, like, the beginning and end of their adventure, and they look the same. Like, in the first three, like, you look at their costuming, by the end of the movie, their clothes are all ripped up. They're covered from head to toe in dirt and blood. Like, you could see what they've been through on their costuming. This movie doesn't have that for some reason. Indy also never shoots a gun in this movie. Have you noticed that? He never shoots a gun. Even in Dial of Destiny, he gets into a gunfight. He doesn't shoot a gun in this movie. Why? It's Indiana Jones. He shoots bad guys. That's what he does. Come on. More violence, please. Why does Mac take so long to betray Indy? I mean, he could have done it sooner so he didn't have to ride in the trunk of the car at the beginning of the movie, right? Like, it's supposed to be like this twist where, like, when Mac turns his gun on Indy, it's like, oh, he's not actually his friend. But it's like, why would he wait till then to reveal that to him? If he had done it before, like Colonel Dovchenko says, they were digging in the dirt looking for this junk, right? They could have just shown us that scene and then have Mac betray him and then Indy get thrown in the trunk of the car. I mean, I get that they want to do the cool reveal, but they still could have done that. They could have done something else. All you had to do was have like an extra scene. My camera cut out on me. But anyway, all you had to do was have an extra scene at the beginning. Would have worked fine. But he just waits and he rides in the trunk of the car through the desert. It's like, you didn't have to do that. Let's see. Why did Mutt bring his motorcycle to Peru if he never uses it? Like, they said he brings a motorcycle, so they set it up like he's going to use it during the jungle chase or something, and he could have, and that would have been really cool. But he's like, they left my bike at the cemetery. It's like, but, well, that's disappointing. I thought he was going to use it in another cool scene, like when they were escaping the 2 KGB guys after they left the diner. That was a cool action sequence, and they set it up like he was going to use it again, but he didn't. That was odd. Why are there 13 skeletons? The movie never explains. I mean, I get why. It's because it's based on the real legend, but it's like they don't say it in the movie. Would have been nice if there was some kind of explanation to that. Also, Indy doesn't really escape very many situations by the skin of his teeth. I think he's kind of too strong. I mean, the ant thing was the exception, but I mean, he's always like escaping situations just barely with his life. And in this movie, he doesn't really do that. He's very powerful in this movie. Like, I love the ant fight, but, and it's very, like, a lot of people complain that, like, in the ant fight, it's like, he's not like really getting his butt kicked like he normally does, but it's very obvious he's losing the fight. So I kind of disagree with that. But I kind of get what people are saying. He does seem a little bit OP in this movie. I also feel like Indy needed to do more in the jungle sequence. For the most part, he just kind of drives. I think he needed more to do there. Um, the tree branch, like they drive the car after they escape from the ants, and they land on a tree branch, and like it lowers them down, and they drive it into the water, and they float down the river, and then it comes back and it knocks the Russians off this edge of the cliff. It's a little cartoony. I mean, Indiana Jones has always been like a little bit corny, like in Last Crusade when like the plane goes into the tunnel, and the Nazi's sitting there like he can't believe it, and Indy looks at his dad like, "What?" Like it's Indiana Jones has always been like this. So this doesn't bother me as much as it does other people, but it is a little cartoony that it would fly back and just smack him down like a fly swatter. Um, I think Spalko needed a practical death, not a CGI one. This movie does kind of lack those horror elements. Again, the ant thing is the exception, but the ants are CGI though, so it doesn't work as well as those types of moments in the other three films. And Spalko has a cool death. I mean, like she's overrun with knowledge to the point where she just turns to dust and flies up into the UFO. But it's like it's CGI though, so it's not. I don't care. When you do things that through CGI, I don't care as much because I know it's fake. If you do it practically, I get more out of that. So yeah, I think she needed a practical effect. They could have like had her head catch on fire or something. Like they could have like made a mole of her head and then like melted it. That would have been kind of cool. I mean, not exactly like in Raiders. I don't mean like just the face melting. I mean like the whole head could have caught on fire. I don't know. That was just my idea. Um, Nobody's interest in the skull is ever explained. It shows that Indy doesn't even care about it. This characters in this movie have very unclear motivations. Why does Indy even help Mutt? He doesn't even know who Mary Williams is. Why is he helping him? He keeps expressing like this disinterest in the skull throughout the movie. So why is he trying so hard to like go after and return it to Akator? Nobody has like a really clear motivation except that Spalko wants the skull for mind control and Mac wants money. That's it. I don't. So what are like when you see our heroes going through Akator and they got the skull and with them and they're trying to return? It's like, why are they even there? Like Mutt says, through ice and tears, we got to go through that waterfall. And then he's like, I'll do it. Nobody else has to come. And Mutt's like, who cares? It's brought us nothing but trouble. Look what it did to him. And it's like, what do you mean, who cares? You just said we got to go through that waterfall. So it's like when they go in to return the skull, it's like, why are they even doing it? What do they care? The movie never explains their motivations. Why does Indy go on this adventure? Why is he looking for the skull? Why is he trying to return the skull? None of it is clear. It's like Indy doesn't seem to care. So why should I care? Let's see. I feel like Mutt needed more depth. He spends a lot of the movie just asking questions pertaining to the plot. And that's what I was saying earlier, is that this movie is very plot driven. There isn't enough characterization in this movie. We don't get to spend enough time with the characters and get to know the characters because all they really talk about is the plot. Like when Indy meets Mutt, throughout most of their adventure, they're just talking about the skull, which is, I mean, yeah, the exposition is good in this movie. It's interesting, but it's like we don't really get to spend a lot of personal time with these characters. And Indiana Jones movies have always been about the characters. So why do they just spend all their time talking about the plot? Let's see. It's too exposition heavy. I feel like the characters need to play off each other more and have more personal conversations and banter interactions. Like, I feel like Indy and Mutt at the end of the movie needed a moment where he's like, I'm sorry that I left your mom. I'm sorry I wasn't there for you as a father, but I'm going to be here for you now. And he'd be like, thanks, Dad. And then they hug each other and it's all sweet. You know what I mean? Like, it needed more of that, but it doesn't. And it doesn't really seem like anybody in this movie has an arc. I also feel like the skull needed a more grand reveal. It doesn't really hype up its discovery. Like when in this picture here, right? When they lift the ark out of the stone box and that music starts blaring up and it's like, oh my God, there it is. Or that John Williams score when Indy discovers the Shankara stones and that chorus is like, ah! And he's holding them and he's like, oh, like, I can't believe what I'm looking at. And then like when he walks in and like in Last Crusade and they got all the fake grails and he's looking and he picks up the grail. And it's just, and you know, Walter Donovan dies from drinking from the wrong grail. Like they hype up all the MacGuffins, and when Indy finds them, it's cool. But in this one, he just pulls back this old rag, and I mean, the look on his face where he's like, "Whoa!" But that's it. They don't really like hype up its reveal. Like it should have been like a grander moment. You know what I mean? But they just sort of find it. And it's a little disappointing. Why does Marion forgive Indy for leaving her? I mean, I like the "they weren't you, honey" line, but it's like, why does she fall for him so easy? Like, I feel like she has more integrity than that, but she's just sort of falls for him again. It's like, why? What's your motivation for doing that? Like I said, nobody has a clear motivation for anything in this movie. Why does the U.S. government stop investigating Indy for communism? It's the same thing like with Dial of Destiny. Like he's framed for murder, and then the movie just sort of drops that plot. This movie drops that plot too. It drops that in the Doomtown sequence. It's all just pointless. Okay, so that's the end of my cons. Now let's get into my mixed. Okay, so this movie doesn't really particularly make it clear that Russia is the villain and America is the hero. It shows that both are wrong, unlike in the previous films where it's very obvious that like the Nazis and the Thuggee are the bad guys. I don't know if this is a good thing or a bad thing. Like if they're saying like, well, nobody was really right in the arms race, but it doesn't really make it clear necessarily I feel like that the Russians are the villains, other than that Spalko is a villain because Spalko wants to do mind control, but it just seems like her and her cronies may be bad guys, but it doesn't feel like it makes communism and the Soviets in general feel like the bad guys, you know, like the Nazis and the Thuggee always felt like they're all bad, but it just sort of seems like Spalko could be like a one-offer within the Communist Party. So I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, because like I said, you can argue there really wasn't a good guy in the arms race. So I don't know. I don't really know how to feel about that. Maybe I'm totally wrong. Maybe you completely disagree with me on that, and you think it clearly paints Russia as the bad guys. Let me know. Knowledge was their treasure. I used to always love that. But then when I got older, I realized the movie really hypes up something that we never get. Like they talk about the lost city of gold with aqueducts and all this stuff. And then they get there and it's just like these old pyramids. And it's like, oh, okay. That's disappointing. Like, and it's because they say like knowledge is their treasure. Like the aliens have higher standards, but I also would have liked to have seen what they were hyping up. So I feel kind of mixed on that. I think it would have been better if they walked in and there's this whole city of gold with all these aqueducts and technology that wouldn't be seen for thousands of years. And it's just like, oh my God, like blow our minds. But then they get there and it's like, oh, it's just some pyramids and they have vines on them. Okay. So this is a spoiler for Dial of Destiny for anybody who hasn't seen Dial of Destiny yet. Indy has a happy ending of Dial of Destiny, even though it still kills off his son, right? Like Mutt has died in the Vietnam War now. He repairs his marriage, gains a daughter, and his best friend is still around. Okay, so I like that. Not necessarily a mix, but I like that. And like people complain like, okay, so Indy had a happy ending in this one, right? He finally gets the family he never had. But it's like, yeah, but in Dial of Destiny, he still has a happy ending, right? Sala's there for him, so it's like, you know, not a big deal for me. The last thing I just want to say is that Temple of Doom and Last Crusade may be flawed, especially Last Crusade for me. There's just so much stuff that happens in Last Crusade that I really have to suspend my disbelief. Like, they're not perfect movies. I gave them both a 100 just because they feel perfect to me, but they're flawed films for sure. I feel like Raiders is the only movie in this franchise that is perfect to me, or nearly perfect. Temple and Crusade definitely have their problems for sure, but they're still executed with perfection. This movie is just riddled with flaws, and it's not at all executed with perfection. I don't want to sound too much like I hate this movie. Like I said at the beginning of the movie, at the review, I like this movie. It's fine, but I'm never like, you know what I want to watch right now? Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. Yeah, that sounds like a good time right now. Let me get the popcorn and just pop that movie in and have a good night. Like, no, I don't do that. When I binge watch the Indiana Jones franchise, that's the only time I ever really watched this movie. And I don't like dread like, I have to watch Kingdom of the Crystal Skull next. It's just kind of like, okay, now I'm through the best ones. Now I have to get to the lesser good ones, you know? But still, it's not a bad movie. I enjoy it fine. I don't think it's as bad as people say. I understand why some people hate this movie, but it's just, again, it's like how I feel about Phantom Menace and Attack of the Clones. It's fine. It's enjoyable. You can put it in. It's something to watch. It'll entertain you, but you're not going to really get anything special out of it. That's kind of just what this is. So, with all that being said and done, I am going to give Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull a 70 out of 100. And I feel like that is being generous. After all those flaws I just named, yeah, it's kind of amazing I'm not going lower, but maybe it's just because I have so much nostalgia for this movie that I decided to give it a higher score than that. But honestly, I could see myself going lower. So, yeah. That's it. I'm done. I have reviewed all 5 Indiana Jones movies now. We are finished. I'm going to move on to other stuff. I saw Oppenheimer tonight, so got more stuff coming. So, okay, that's it. Thank you so much for watching. Subscribe to Pirate Planet Entertainment. And subscribe to Pirate Planet Entertainment. Hit the like button. Anything you want to see me review, drop it in the comments. And that's about it. Thank you so much for watching. And I wish you all fortune and glory. Good night.